Richard Hale sat in the back of his sleek black Mercedes, the hum of the city fading into the background. He was the man people envied, CEO of a multimillion-dollar company, known for his sharp decisions and unshakable confidence. Yet, as he leaned back after another grueling board meeting, he felt a hollowness gnaw at him, a loneliness that no luxury car or corner office could erase. The streets outside blurred into streaks of neon and rain, a world he rarely paid attention to anymore. Then, at a red light, something caught his eye. A little girl stood on the sidewalk, drenched by the cold rain. Her hair clung to her face, her shoes were worn thin, and in her small hands she held a soggy cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, please help." She looked no older than 7, her fragile frame trembling as cars passed without slowing. For a moment, Richard felt a flicker of unease. He had seen people like her before, always on the periphery of his world, but he had trained himself to look away, to let logic and routine drown out compassion. Yet something about this girl was different. Maybe it was the way her eyes, though tired, still carried a quiet plea. Maybe it was the way the rain seemed to swallow her whole. Against every instinct that told him to stay detached, Richard found his hand moving to lower the window. His driver glanced back, surprised, but Richard ignored him. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. Why tonight? Why this child? But in that instant, the weight of his wealth and power felt meaningless compared to the sight of her shivering in the dark. For the first time in years, Richard Hale broke his own rules and chose to stop. Richard leaned forward, his voice soft but uncertain, trying to offer comfort the only way he knew how, with solutions, with promises of safety. Yet the words barely left his lips before the little girl interrupted, her small voice carrying an edge sharper than anything he had ever heard in a boardroom. "Shut up." The words hit him like a blow. Richard Hale, the man who commanded rooms of executives and silenced entire conferences with a single glance, sat speechless. No one had ever dared speak to him this way, not colleagues, not rivals, not even those who despised him. And yet here was a child, fragile and trembling, looking him in the eye with more honesty than anyone in his world of polished masks and empty words. For a second, he wanted to bristle, to let pride shield him as it always did. But something in her tone stopped him. It wasn't rudeness, not defiance. It was raw pain. Her lips quivered, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and her small hands clenched as though holding on to some invisible thread. Richard's chest tightened. In that silence that followed, he realized the girl's command was not born from arrogance, but from heartbreak. She had heard too many promises before, words that never turned into action, assurances that evaporated as quickly as they were spoken. She didn't need more empty comfort. She didn't want another stranger telling her everything would be fine. For the first time in his life, Richard Hale felt his power stripped away. There was no deal to negotiate, no title to lean on, no wealth that could shield him. There was only a broken child in his car, asking him, pleading with him, not to pretend, and so he obeyed. He shut up. Her words hung in the air like a dagger, small but piercing. Richard had faced hostile investors, ruthless competitors, and the crushing weight of billion-dollar decisions, yet nothing had ever disarmed him like the trembling voice of this child. Please don't talk like you care. Everyone says that, but then they leave. Just shut up and drive. The way she said it carried the weight of too many broken promises. Richard could almost see the trail of faces that had told her she mattered, only to vanish when it was inconvenient. It wasn't anger in her voice. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes when hope has been ripped away too many times. Richard's chest ached, and for once, his instincts to fix, to control, to dominate failed him. His money couldn't shield her from hunger. His title couldn't promise her safety. His carefully polished speeches, the kind that won over rooms of powerful people, collapsed in the face of her raw, unfiltered truth. In that heavy silence, Richard saw her not as a problem to solve, but as a child, abandoned, scared, and desperate for someone who wouldn't walk away. She didn't need a CEO. She didn't need another empty vow. She needed something he had long buried beneath layers of success and pride, simple human compassion. So he said nothing. He drove on, the quiet inside the car louder than the rain tapping against the windows. For the first time in years, Richard allowed himself to feel powerless, and in that powerlessness he found the courage to simply be present. The neon glow of a small diner cut through the night as Richard pulled into the parking lot. His driver hesitated, confused. This was not the kind of place a man like Richard Hale was ever seen, but Richard didn't care. He opened the door for the little girl, gently guiding her inside, the warmth of the diner wrapped around them, the scent of coffee and fresh bread filling the air. They slid into a booth by the window. Richard handed her the menu, though she didn't look at it. Her eyes were fixed on the plates being carried past by the waitress. He ordered for her something simple and warm, and when the food arrived, she ate with a hunger that broke him in ways he couldn't explain. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty assurances. He simply sat there, watching, waiting, letting her set the pace. Slowly, between bites, she began to speak about her mom, how she had been sick for months before passing, about the nights that followed when the world seemed to turn its back on her, about sidewalks that felt colder than ice and strangers' footsteps that never slowed to help. Her voice cracked as she spoke of fear, the kind that sat in her chest every night, whispering that she was alone. Richard listened, truly listened, in a way he hadn't done with anyone in years, and as her words poured out, something inside him shifted. He no longer saw a helpless child, he saw a reflection of himself. He remembered being a boy who once felt abandoned, unseen, unworthy, but unlike her, he had buried it beneath wealth, achievements, and a fortress of pride. As she finished her meal, Richard realized that this encounter wasn't about charity, it was about rediscovery, about choosing humanity over power, connection over control, and in that quiet booth, something long frozen inside him began to break open. The night stretched on, but Richard didn't rush. For once, he wasn't thinking about meetings, contracts, or the endless chase of success. His entire world had shrunk to this diner booth, to the small girl across from him who had finally stopped shivering. Her eyes, once filled with suspicion and pain, softened as she pushed the empty plate aside. Richard leaned forward, his voice quiet but steady. He didn't speak like a CEO or a man with influence. He spoke like someone who cared. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'm not going to leave you." The girl blinked as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. For so long, words had been just words, fragile promises that dissolved into disappointment. But there was something in Richard's tone, something raw, unpolished, real, that made her believe, if only for a moment, and in that moment, Richard knew this wasn't about charity. He wasn't going to write a check and walk away. He was going to change her life, and in doing so, change his own. The decision wasn't logical, it wasn't planned, but it was the first choice in years that felt truly right. The little girl's lips curved into the faintest smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Richard's chest swelled, a lump rising in his throat. All the accolades, all the wealth, all the power. None of it had ever touched him the way those two simple words did. As they stepped out of the diner into the cool night air, Richard felt lighter, freer, as though he had discovered a kind of wealth money could never buy. Because in the end, the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in love, in promises kept, in lives transformed by compassion. Richard Hale's story is not just about a powerful man meeting a child in need. It's about the moment when walls of pride, wealth, and ambition come crashing down before the simplest truth that humanity is worth more than any empire. What began as an ordinary drive home turned into a turning point, a chance for redemption. A little girl's pain stripped away the armor he had built his whole life, and her quiet trust gave him a purpose far greater than any boardroom victory. This encounter reminds us that compassion doesn't always come in grand gestures. It often starts in silence, in listening, in choosing to show up when it matters most. Richard discovered that the legacy we leave behind is not written in our titles or fortunes, but in the lives we touch, the people we choose to love, and the promises we keep. In the end, the girl gained a family, and Richard gained something he didn't even know he was missing, a heart awakened. And together, they found what so many search for but few ever truly see, that the greatest wealth lies not in possessions, but in connection, kindness, and love.